Atu kia koutou katoa. I'd firstly just like to introduce our kai kōrero for today. Ka mihi atu kia koe, Jeff. Tēnei he uri o Ngāpuhi e mihi atu ana kia koe, he uri anō hoki no Ngāpuhi. Nā runga I tērā, e hihi ana mātou te ropo o toi tangata te mihi atu kia koutou katoa. We'd like to thank all of you for attending this wānanga today. And this wānanga slash webinar. It's going to be a good kōrero on our food systems and food security across the motu. Ko Jeff tērā, tētahi o ngā tino tohunga me ki, I roto I tēnei tūmomo ao. So Jeff's going to take us through this webinar today. And if you do have any pātai e te whānau, the capability for you to do that is across the bottom of your webinar screen. So there's a Q&A section. A lot of the kaimahi tend to use the chat section, so we can look in between the two of them. But tuatahi ka mihi kia koe, Jeff, and to everyone who's come here today. I'll let Jeff take away the kai kōrero component in nei kia tae mātou te whakarongo. Ke mihi ana kia koutou. Kia ora rā.
All right, we're up and running. Nami kia koutou. As Dario so wonderfully introduced me, I'm Jeff Keda. I'm at Massey University, and my background is as an exercise physiologist, strangely enough. So why am I talking about food systems? Well, in the last few years, I've moved over to looking at this area, and we've just completed a study in food security. And so today, I'm going to give you a bit of background about that, and then talk about the study and the results and what that means for us. So it's a nice long title, Food Systems, Sovereignty and Security. And the reason why I want to talk about those three things is that they're very much interrelated, they're connected to each other, and we need to be able to understand how they work together to be able to address the issues of food security. So the significance for us as Māori in terms of kai is that we have not just a sustenance relationship with food. Not only does it give us calories, energy, but it gives us, nutrients and water. But because food was so important to us as a people, we have karakia, we have atua dedicated to it, we have multiple atua dedicated to kai. We have a knowledge of Māori for kai itself. So kai has its own Māori, has its own life force. And then we've got, obviously, our kawa, our protocols, and our guidelines around kai. So for Māori, it's more significant, kai is more significant to us than just being food to replenish us. It is something that is spiritual, that is social. So as I said, these three themes of systems and sovereignty and security are intertwined. They're very much a part of each other. You can't really pull them apart from each other. Here we have food systems, which means talking about delivering food from the field to the fork. Then we have food sovereignty. It's the degree of control over food. How much autonomy do we have around our kai? And then security, which is essentially the reliable access to nutritious food. So we need to ensure that we have a consistent supply of nutritious food. So here's a graphic about food systems. And as you can see, it looks rather complicated, and it is. So the basis of this is to show that there are systems within systems. And Māori think of this in a, this doesn't have our spiritual aspect connected with this, but it certainly has everything else. Our biological system, our health system, our social system, even politics are intertwined with kai. So what we've got to do is have a better understanding of how we see kai. So we should develop our own Maori system of kai. Food sovereignty, now this is a little bit more complicated, I'm sorry, but food sovereignty is the right of the peoples to define their own food and agriculture. Now, the issue with this is that there is no one definition of food sovereignty. So some people have a different definition or different aspect to food sovereignty. Essentially, it's to be able to give a peoples or a community control over the food that they have access to. So as it says here, food sovereignty doesn't negate trade, and rather it promotes the formulation of trade policies and practices, etc. Blah, blah, blah. Right. So it's important for Māori to consider food sovereignty so that we can have greater control over the foods that we eat. At the moment, it's more controlled by our global food systems, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So this leads us to food security. So this is the issue that I've been addressing over the last few years, and this is a broad definition of food security. So the ready availability of nutritionally adequate and safe foods, and the assured ability to acquire personal acceptable foods in a socially acceptable way. It's long and convoluted, and the reason for that is to make it as accurate and precise as possible. In New Zealand, from our adult nutrition survey, we had, from 2008, we have 60%, so that's 3 in 5 households that are fully food secure. As you can see here, 40% of Māori households are fully food secure. That means that 3 in 5 Māori households do not have reliable access to nutritious and safe foods. But this is the reason why I've been trying to work into this area, because it's a major issue for us. As you can see from this write-up here, this publication, it's from Winsome Parnell and a group of others. And Winsome Parnell is essentially our leading food security researcher in New Zealand, and she's provided the basis of all the research that we've had. And here, back in 2001, she discussed the issue of food security coming up. Now we're at 18 years later, and we still haven't had a good solution. In fact, the food security issue has got worse for Aotearoa, and particularly worse for Māori. So when we have poor food security, when we have unreliable access to nutritious foods, we're going to have poor health consequences as a part of that. Leading on from the Nutrition Survey of New Zealand, there was a Health Research Council project funded, and Toi Tangata, as Te Hotu Manawa Māori, was part of that, and it was called Enhance. And so this particular project did a great write-up about what has been happening in terms of food security in New Zealand and what should be happening. Leading on from that, this particular graph is talking about how food security could be addressed in Aotearoa. Now this graphic looks really complicated. I apologize for that, but that's what was in the paper. But for us, we need to acknowledge that there are 3 things that we need to look at. There's the money available in the households, there's food purchasing influences, and there's the cost of healthy, nutritious foods. So the money available in households. So here we're talking about how much dispensable income that we have to be able to pay for healthy foods. There's food purchasing influences. So that means that our knowledge about foods and also access to things like supermarkets and shops. And then we've got the cost of healthy, nutritious foods. So what we've got to do there is try and reduce the costs that are for healthy foods. So what they've done here is they've proposed 11 initiatives, and here they are here. So as you can see, they're grouped into their 3 themes. And one of the things that we were looking at is the food purchasing influences. So the community markets, the community gardens, and improving access to food. So this particular one is looking at a bottom-up perspective of accessing kai. The other one is the money available in households, and there's multiple possible interventions that are happening there. And one of the things that has happened already is the provision of free and subsidised foods in schools. So we have breakfast in schools, and some schools have lunches in schools too. And then the cost of healthy, nutritious foods. What we have removing the sales tax, and also community-based initiatives like food cooperatives. So here we have some possible intervention that we could put in here for that's specific to Maori, is using traditional kai as a way of addressing food security. And Christina, who is here today, thank you, Christina, for logging on. Traditional kai can potentially improve food security, and there's multiple ways that we could possibly do that. But at the moment, we know that there is gardening initiatives all over Aotearoa at the moment. And that can happen in schools, such as Stephanie has also referred to the fruit and vegetables in the schools. And so, you know, that is a fantastic initiative. There's Plant to Plate Aotearoa. There's a lot of gardening style interventions that have been put out there. One of the problems that we have with traditional kai is the government versus Māori tension regarding access to that kai. So there is issues over going into our mahinga kai to be able to get our traditionally available foods, and there is some kind of restriction on that from external parties, not Māori parties. So that's leading us to start to think about food sovereignty, about how much control that we have over kai. And so Jessica Hutchings has considered this with the Te Waka Kai Ora. So it's the National Māori Organics Association that has local food systems focus. And that is driven by Māori values, but reflects the Via Campesina principles. So what that Via Campesina is a worldwide drive to have local sustainable food systems. And so this is certainly one way to go, to be able to try and wrestle back some of our control over traditional kai. You may also be aware of the work that's happening in Whakatāne through Mate Heitia, and this particular write-up was addressing that one. And what they were looking at was revitalising marakai and having a restorative framework about the sustainable ecosystem. So what they were trying to do was looking at ways that Māori could actually take control of ensuring our environment is healthy to be able to access that kai that's could be harvested there. It's also considering the issue of tribal and whānau-based food cooperatives, having Māori control over where they can get their hold of their food. And they've also indicated that Māori food security has to be, the solutions to it have to be multifaceted. So you can't have just one answer. So food cooperatives is not the only answer to food security. There are multiple ways we need to address it, and communities have been doing that already. So if we look at our food system, about how we get a hold of our food, this is a basic kind of version of the food system, different from what we saw before, where we had this multiple relationships all over the place. And so it's I suppose it starts at our production and moves through processing, and then there's distribution and transportation, there's marketing, access to food, and then there's our markets and purchasing. So this is the consumer here, and then preparation and consumption, and trying to recover waste and nutrient recycling to go back into production. So that is our utopian ideal of a food system. That waste is not necessarily, waste recovery is not necessarily happening all the time. In fact, you know, we estimate that there's probably about a 40% waste happening with kai at the moment. Mostly that is actually happening through households, but there is some primary production and manufacturing waste occurring there too. So if we look at our global food system, these are just the top 10 companies that in 2018 that contribute to our food system. And if you have a look at them closely, most of their products are very processed foods. Very few of them are actually, fruit and vegetables, produce, so not fresh foods. And these guys have the major control over our food system. And the reason for that is a thing called vertical integration. And what that means is from field to fork, or from plant to plate, they are controlling the distribution of those resources. So they've bought up farms or contract farms to be able to produce solely for them. And that may become a reliable income for a primary producer like a farmer, but the issue is that these companies will squeeze those farmers out. So the farmer doesn't have much control over the price of their food. So we're back to our graphic again. So we've got to understand that our food system at the moment is global. That's what we're working within. There are definite political and economic interests in here. Because that these companies are huge, they're multi-billion-dollar companies, that they have a massive influence on what happens to our planetary and human health. They are economic interests. They are not human interests. So if we are naive enough to think that they have our health interests at heart, then they're going to take advantage of that through their marketing and distribution of food. So that's where the sovereignty comes in, that we need to take some kind of control over here. So we have, as consumers, some choice and some influence over our food choices, but because it's a very difficult system to change, because these companies are global and they're massive, that we've got a fight on our hands to be able to have a healthy change for our food system. And that includes for the environment. So this is a simplified system for our Māori food systems. We have our mahinga kai on the left, and we have our mara kai on the right. And so traditionally, this is where we accessed our kai. Then we brought it together, prepared that kai. And so we have food preparation and also, karakia to go along with that. That moves down to actually consuming that food. So whether it's a hakari or just casual consumption of food. And then some of that food waste would go back to our gardens, dependent on what kind of waste it was. Overarching all of that is our atua, is that there are multiple gods that are able to provide us with advice, to provide us with guidance in terms of when and where we can access our food. And of course, within that, there's also maramataka to be able to know when's the best times to be able to harvest and plant. So this led us to a testing whether one of those options of the food security initiatives would work, one of those 11 options. And so we received funding from the Health Research Council to be able to put into effect a food cooperative. Well, it's a style of food cooperative. And so, so what we need to do is we need to put together this particular cooperative, and it was a vegetables and fruit cooperative. And so we have great health benefits from vegetables and fruit, as we probably all know. But the issue is that 2 in 5 New Zealanders don't eat the recommended 3 vegetables and 2 fruits a day. Mainly that's because of the cost of kai. And so that is a issue for us, that we need to get more people accessing vegetables and fruit and get them consuming it. So there's a great question here I see. So how do we think also do you think this curriculum should be in schools about marakai? And absolutely. So there are marakai curriculum in some schools already. So that's already happening at the moment. So mahinga kai, as Dario has pointed out, there is a taonga, and it's completely missed a generation, so or maybe even 2 generations. So that knowledge is not being passed down well. I think particularly part of that knowledge is around caring for our environment, ensuring we don't take the young kutai, all those kinds of things. It's harvesting at the right times, gathering at the right times. The only way that we can restore it is to be able to have a formalized way of presenting it to whānau, because at the moment, doing it just through, say, whānau ourselves, passing on knowledge from generation to generation, could work, but it's not as effective as having a kura like a wānanga to be able to teach that. So I think it should be done in a more formalized way at the moment. So with our study, we decided that we're going to do a vegetables and fruit initiative, and this is Aotearoa. So this is Palmerston North, and this is a graphic based on the measures of deprivation. So we've got 7 domains here in deprivation, and the darkest domains, the darkest colors here, are the ones with the highest levels of deprivation, and the ones in the lightest are the least deprived communities. So they're deprived in all of these issues. So we decided to come down to this area here, and with our collaborators, and you can see here the growing level of deprivation, and this blue line here represents our community that we worked in. You can see here, it's one of the communities that have the highest levels of deprivation in New Zealand. We thought that this would be a good place to start. So essentially it comes from the question, will households eat vegetables and fruit if it is available? Now you might you might think that that is a rhetorical question. It can be answered quite easily. Of course they would eat it. But what we've found is that we actually don't know, and that was the question that was coming from funders. We would put together a Marakai initiative and put it out there for that to be funded, but funders would come back and say, well, we don't know if we can get a great number of people eating vegetables and fruit, especially since we know that this number is so low. So in this initiative, we delivered free vegetables and fruit, 5+ a day, to households, to 20 households, or to 40 households, sorry. And they also had an option to purchase vegetables and fruit too. So what happened was that we gave them free fruit and vegetables for 3 months, and then gave them the option to purchase vegetables and fruit for another 3 months. We also put on 8 wānanga, so we had workshops about cooking kai. Because we provided with beans and lentils, we made sure that we had a workshop on that to ensure that they were familiar with how to use it, store it, etc. And of course, we asked them why they wanted to participate. And here it says that that the 94% of them said that because it was free food, and that's absolutely fine. That's what we're looking for. 89% said that they took part in the study because we had a trusted recruiter, which is our health and social services agency that we went through. And very few of them had interest in research, which was not surprising to me as a researcher. And few had interest in the wānanga also. So, when we have a look at how much fruit and vegetables was actually consumed, we can see in the blue here, of the vegetables, 88% of the vegetables were consumed. Now, I don't know if you can think of your own food consumption at home, but for me, I'm pretty sure that I don't eat 88% of the fruit and vegetables that we have in our household. Unfortunately, there is a bit of waste, and that would be gone into our compost. But this figure here, this 88%, is actually quite remarkable. What was a thing that kind of didn't surprise me, but surprised me that it actually happened, that 3% of the food was given away to their neighbours and whānau, because much for the reason that they wanted other people to share in their good fortune of accessing kai. And 6% was unused, so might have gone off, or it might have been possibly inedible, like we had some hard pears that were difficult to eat. Then we had the fruit, and very much the same stats. 87% of the fruit was consumed, 4% was given away, and 6% unused. So to us, that answered that question about would people eat fruit and vegetables if it was made available to them. When we talked about our packs, so we provided $5 packs to the whānau if they should want to purchase them after the free food. And and they said that the packs were cheap enough, but they just didn't have enough money. The fruit and vegetables were good enough quality. There was enough variety. They couldn't buy fruit and vegetables cheaper elsewhere, and 86% wanted to buy fruit and vegetables. Some of them had difficulty making the times for the cooperative because it was only delivered in one day of the week, so they had to have their money available the day before. So that was some of the difficulty, the logistics of it, of having a vegetable and fruit cooperative. And these were the kinds of things that they were interested in. So food vouchers from WINS, which I was quite surprised at, because I got from some of these whānau that they were saying that WINS was difficult to deal with. So perhaps going through a social worker or some kind of moderator or mediary would be able to help. And we have local fruit trees being planted. Being able to buy from fruit and vegetables from a local source was another thing. So we're looking at doing a pop-up store for that area now. And then learning about foraging. So it's more, you can see here that they're looking to do, having more food sovereignty. They're having more control over their access to fruit and vegetables. So I have some takeaways for you here. The main thing that we have, that we've learned from this work is that we know that food security is a real threat to Aotearoa. It's getting worse. That food sovereignty will help. That there is a small change underway at the moment, but it's not good enough. We need a lot more bottom-up community realised initiatives. These things need evidence, and so for our example of the food cooperative, that only a few of them could actually afford to purchase food that was really low price. It was extremely low price. In fact, it didn't have any markup on it. It was wholesale food. So only a few of them could actually purchase it. So we're talking about 12% of those households. So our issue is that the food is still too expensive for these whānau. So that means that not only do we need bottom-up initiatives, but we also need top-down initiatives, which is the policy and legislation and regulation of the food industry. One of the things that we could certainly consider is a universal basic income. So to ensure that everyone has a living wage, so the UBI, and that will help to increase the amount of money available to be able to spend on vegetables and fruit or a healthy diet. The other thing is that obviously our housing crisis is eating away at any income all families have. So we need to be able to have more houses. We need initiatives to be able to ensure that that expense doesn't go too far over and eat into the dispensable income of whānau. And then one thing we do have to realise from community-based initiatives is that most of the time we have a lot of volunteer work. Now, volunteer work is fantastic and it's amazing, but we shouldn't rely on that. We shouldn't have to have charities being able to do all of this work. We should be able to have most of our whānau being able to purchase their own food and have control over where they get it from. So the charitable aspect is fantastic and it should be there, but it should be for much fewer people than what it's happening at the moment. There is a lot of people going to having to access initiatives like this because they just have so little money. Okay, so that's it from me, whānau. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear from it. We've done 35 minutes, so I think that's good enough. We've got more research coming along, and so we're hoping to be able to have more information, more evidence to be able to continue with some of these initiatives. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Jeff. Tuatahi kamihi atu kia koe. I think there will be a few pātai sort of coming through as we go through. I've actually asked one myself. So I was wondering, you did kōrero, you spoke about in the early stages of the presentation in and around kawa and tikanga. And I think some of that stuff that we've sort of talked about over time, I guess, about what we deem as too precious to be documented in a formal way. So what's your thought or your whakaaro in and around documenting kawa and tikanga? Is it something that we should be prioritizing to share on a larger scale? Are we keeping it hapu iwi focused, or is it something that we should be, I guess, populating across the motu?
I agree with what you said. Is that it is too precious to be able to put down in documentation. What I actually meant was having a formal wānanga to be able to present it face to face. So kanohi ki te kanohi. So rather than actually documenting it. So I think that's what's the most important is that it must have a regional focus. So there must be a localized focus for this kind of mātauranga.
Right.
However, I feel it has to be a coordinated approach across the motu.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than just having one region being really strong at it, we will need to have all regions being very strong because each has their own special way of doing things, and that should be promoted. Absolutely, I can't see why we can't do that, and that's part of our sovereignty too. Now, Sarah, I see Sarah just asked a question about the study. I'll just answer that. So Sarah asked 51% of participants were interested in learning how to cook. Do we have any feedback on how this is best delivered? So for our particular case, we delivered it at a marae, in the marae kitchen, and it was all hands-on. The participants felt that was really good, but they wanted control over what was being presented to them. So they enjoyed the workshops about lentils and beans, but there were other things that they were really interested in how they could bring their budgeting skills to the kai also. So have to be a bit creative in the delivery of the wānanga for learning how to cook. He said, how did you measure the intake? Oh, Debbie asked a really good question here. How did you measure the intake of veggies and fruit by the whānau? We actually had our project manager go into the household. So we asked the whānau if we could go into the household when we delivered the fruit and vegetables, and we interviewed them about how much they ate and how much they gave away, and then also they gave us back they showed us the box of the food left over. So we had a really good indication about how many serves the household consumed. We felt that it was better than actually asking them how many servings a day did you eat. Our research in that way of questioning is we found that was very inaccurate way of measuring how much serves of vegetables and fruit a whānau consumed. Davina also asked about developed a Māori food sovereignty model. No, I haven't, because I feel I'm not at the stage of being able to do that at this point in time. So what I'd like to do is be able to gather more evidence about how we could possibly put that together. So I think it's too early for me to be able to do that at this point in time. And kia ora, Sama. next piece of evidence. So my next piece of evidence that I'm doing is we're looking at mapping the free food system. So remember how we were talking about all these food systems and some are localized, some are regionalized, and some are national or global. I feel that there is a complementary food system that's happening at the moment, such as so this is what's happening with food rescue. Here in Aotearoa, we have Just Zilch, and there's many others around the motu, I'm sure, that work alongside the global food system and being able to utilize the kai that's not being consumed and passing it on to our whānau who need. So that's what I'm looking at doing, is mapping that out at the moment, having a proper indication of what is available, what's the extent of the free food system. I think that would really help us try and get a handle on this food security issue. Any policies developed into lowering the prices of fruit and vegetables and maintaining it at a lower level for a long time? So that information that I put on about those 11 initiatives, that was from the Signal et al. Article about food security. And so they were recommending a policy for lowering the prices of fruit and vegetables. I can't see any government doing that right now. It's really unfortunate, but the food industry is a very strong lobbying industry, much like the tobacco industry, and so we need to fight them a little bit more. Sometimes we also need to work with them. There are corporations that are open working with us, so I think that we should be trying to get in with them and being able to develop a way to work alongside them. Sione has asked, are you continuing to promote school gardening, community gardening program? That is another piece of evidence that I want to look at further. The biggest issue that there is with community gardens as such is the with community gardens is the volunteer aspect. So unfortunately, it is an unreliable thing. Many gardens pop up, and there are some gardens, unfortunately, that fade away because of lack of support. And so what we've got to find is the best way to do that. I feel that a social enterprise marakai is the best way to go. So what that means is that they're able to sell some of their produce, but able to give away some of their produce. There's a really good example in Christchurch at the moment that's doing that, which is the car park garden in the inner city, and so they provide fruit and vegetables, or vegetables mainly, I think, to the cafes and restaurants, and so they sell at a premium price because it is fresh and delivered to them by hand on bicycle. So all this climate change effect that it's going to have is a fantastic thing. So they make a profit by being able to sustain themselves and pay for the staff that tend the garden. Then they give their produce to the homeless. So they're able to utilize the fruit and vegetables. So I think that's a really good good style of initiative. Debbie has asked, sovereignty and choice is crucial for whānau. How do we ensure this occurs without making whānau feels like a handout? So this is a really good one. So the only way to be able to do that is, I think, just like some of the research has indicated, that we need the multifaceted aspects. So we need food cooperatives, we need the community gardens, we need the local stores, and we need the food rescue. All of them are able to help in their own way. So whānau have the choice of going to whatever suits their values for their fruit and vegetable access. And also wānanga about fruit and vegetables too, to be able to grow for themselves. I mean, most whānau, unfortunately, won't be able to grow all their fruit and vegetables, but it is certainly a possibility for many whānau. So, so I think that's the answer, is to have lots of options available. That's not going to cost a lot to sustain. All right, so I'm just going to see if there's anything in the chat to I can't see anything more in the chat about any questions in there, so I think we're, yeah. So for us, there's a lot more work to do, but it's looking good for us to develop more initiatives in the Kai space. One of the big things is that we've got to be able to have a government that's going to be able to regulate the food industry. That has to happen. We can't not do it, because then we're always looking to have charitable agencies being able to provide food for whānau, and that's just not sustainable. We can't continue like that. The food industry has got to step up and be more responsible in terms of their impact on the environment, and also impact on whānau through their provision of things like fruit and vegetables.
Tika. Tuatahi ka mihi kia koe, Jeff. Ano hoki kia koutou I aro mai ki tēnei o ngā wānanga me ki. Big thank you to you, Jeff, for the mātauranga that you've shared across to all of us through this webinar. I think there's definitely a lot of takeaways from this kaupapa in terms of how we progress forward, I guess, as a unit who's all interested in the oranga of our tangata, so ngai Māori. So thinking about it, I think you raised some really important aspects in and around the significance that we have as Māori in terms of karakia, atua, mauri, tikanga, and those aspects that share a relationship with the kai. So when you're thinking about that kai, it is more than just the sustenance that we need to get through each day. So yeah, I'd like to say thank you to Jeff on behalf of the Rōpū and on behalf of Toi Tangata as well for constantly, I guess, providing more information to allow us to make better decisions for our people as well. So, you know, nice and informative kōrero. And I'd like to thank you, Jeff, on behalf of Toi Tangata, anō hoki everyone who's attended the webinar today. A big mihi to all of you who have attended. What we will do is we'll get this webinar, it's been recorded, so we're going to chuck it all together, try and get it online by the end of this week. If not this week, it'll be at the start of next week. And you'll be able to access it and share it with anyone that you think might be interested and would love to take away a bit of mātauranga as well. Nō reira, ka mihi atu kia koe, Jeff. Anō hoki kia koutou katoa. Mauri ora kia koutou.
Matua whānau, kia ora.
Kia kite.